Getting rich by creating value. Hey everyone, it's Wolfgang. So I want to explain how to make your limited time more and more valuable to get rich. The whole key to becoming independently wealthy, having independent financial means, is figuring out how to make each unit of time that you have, each hour, bring in more and more money as you go through your career. This involves using trial and error. Very few of us are able to start something that we know will succeed. Usually there's trial and error involved, and the amount of trial and error, the number of times you'll have to try something and have a setback will vary, by the individual. I was watching an Alex Hormozy video recently. He said that he had 9 failures in the beginning. So it varies for different people. So trial and error is essential. Using leverage is essential. Leverage in this case means taking something you already have and leveraging it, not reinventing the wheel, but taking something you've already got, sort of a sunk cost, something you already have like a college degree, and using it to create value. So right out of college, step one, choosing what you think is the highest value activity. Is the highest value activity getting a job or starting a company right out of college? For most people, it's getting a job because you're 2 weeks away from your first paycheck and the ability to pay your rent and to take care of yourself. After you have a job, step one, the highest value activity is looking at options to have a second activity outside of work that also creates value. So your first job creates value by providing a way for you to pay your bills. The second activity is hopefully a means to, like starting a company or something that will eventually lead to you being able to quit your job. So that is step one. Using leverage, you're leveraging your college degree. The second activity outside of work you choose is probably going to be related to what you studied in college. For example, in our case, the 3 of us started a software company, a help desk software company right out of college. We had day jobs as software engineers. After hours, we were creating a software company in the help desk space. So step 2, get friends to help your second activity, this highest value activity you've identified. Get friends to help for an equity share, no salary. So nobody's getting paid. The leverage you're using here is your friendship. You know each other. You can agree that no one's going to get paid anything. It's only going to be for equity. So you're leveraging, obviously you're leveraging your college degree in our case, but you're also leveraging something you already have, your friendship, to get the company started, to get the venture started. Step 3, after you start making revenue, you use leverage to create value by hiring people. The leverage there is you're leveraging the time of other people to help you grow that activity that you identified. In our case, it was a help desk software company. Step 4, in using leverage to create value, take on debt, perhaps, and or take on investors like venture capital or friends. Elon Musk, a lot of his friends invest in his ventures, right? So using leverage to create value, several steps involved there. At the beginning, we're simply trying to get a job so we can pay our bills. At the end, we're trying to get venture capital and or take on debt. So trial and error resilience. The whole reason we have to use trial and error is very few of us know, we can look at 100 opportunities and say, how did we choose help desk software? We looked at a bunch of things. We chose something that we thought was the best shot. But you can get that wrong. Obviously, you can get well along the path and figure out this is not going to work. You have to avoid being impatient. Trial and error means you're taking an educated guess that you chose the correct high value activity. You have to avoid being impatient. This is something I struggle with sometimes. A lot of people do, especially if you read stories like this person, like Zuckerberg, for example, started Facebook in college, and then everything just seemed to work out, and then he's a billionaire, right? Very few, almost nobody has that sort of success. You have to avoid being impatient. Trial and error is the path. I say use trial and error as a path. It is the path to getting rich, to creating value, getting rich by creating value, because you don't know what's going to work in the early days. If you dislike the uncertainty of trial and error and you don't like the setbacks, the possible failures, another option, there's nothing wrong with it, is to choose an established career path like being a doctor or a lawyer who goes to work in a big city in the right area of law, and you can get rich that way. But if you are okay with trial and error, you can make a huge fortune this way. So some examples, if you're if you're not sure if you're the trial and error type, you've actually already got some experience with trial and error. For example, you probably bought stocks, right? And maybe you ended up selling some for a tax loss write-off at the end of the year because the stock dropped. Nobody buys stocks with the intent of selling them after they lose money, right? But people like Warren Buffett are still using trial and error very late in their career. Okay, in 2020, Warren Buffett owned airline stocks: Delta Airlines, Southwest, American, and United. Nobody buys stocks saying to themselves, I'm going to buy this, it's going to drop in value, and then I'm going to lose money. We all buy stocks as a trial and error exercise, hoping the stock will go up. So in this case, in 2020, Buffett lost $20 billion. He sold those airline stocks at a $20 billion loss, okay? Because in 2020, COVID hit, people stopped flying, and he got scared. I think he did, and he sold those stocks. $20 billion loss, trial and error. So another example of something, probably some of you have, how many companies does it take? How many companies do you start before you have one success? For a lot of people like Hormozy, like I said, he had 9 failures in the early part of his journey, and then he found a success. In our case, we started a help desk software company right out of college. And then after we started this, we coded up the project. We started selling it by placing ads in magazines. We started having revenue. But what happened, this happens a lot in Silicon Valley, there was another company. It was a startup company, and it was venture funded. It was a venture capital funded startup in the help desk software space. And we thought to ourselves, their path to an IPO is much shorter than our path. It's probably better if because the opportunity was to join that startup as an early stage software engineer in the founding team. That looked like a better option. So how many companies do you start to make one success? Well, that was one company that we shut down. Even though we were making revenue, the product was finished, we had ads running, we decided to go to, working at that startup was a better option. And they did go IPO. And, I made bank on that choice. That was a good choice, right? So how many companies do you have to start to make one success? Trial and error means being resilient. Don't be impatient. Trial and error means, I know this may not work out, I'm going to do it anyways. The whole thing comes down to choosing what you think is the highest value activity, trying to be as intelligent about that as possible so you reduce the chance that you're going to have a failure. But trial and error is the path to building wealth. So I want to say something about friends, because I've mentioned using friends or getting the help of friends to help you along your journey there. So you're going to be able to create the same value as your 3 closest friends. Okay, in this case, my 2 friends, we were all software engineering majors at UC Berkeley. So we were all sort of on the same path mentally. We wanted to, at some point, someday, have our own independent financial means. So that worked out, but that's not always going to be the case. A lot of people will leave a small town they grew up in because their 3 closest friends, they're not ambitious, or they're not clever, or their work ethic is insufficient. And if you're an ambitious, clever person with a great work ethic, and you find yourself with your 3 closest friends make snide remarks to you like, get a life, because you're working hard after your regular job, you may have to part company with them. You need to surround yourself with people who are at least as ambitious as you are to get rich. I mean, to give you an example, there was someone I worked with at a software company in Silicon Valley there who actually said that, because we had this company, this software company running outside our regular day job, and this person worked at that day job with us and said, get a life. You're doing all this stuff, you're missing out, on having a regular life. And it's like, if you're trying to get rich by creating value, you'll create the same value as your 3 closest friends. You have to be intelligent about that. And sometimes that can be painful, but you have to keep that in mind. If you want to become wealthy, you've got to do what Jeff Bezos does. I read something online. People were giving him a hard time about having all these very rich and famous people at his wedding. And I thought, the reason he's got rich and famous people around him is because he's rich and famous. He's got to surround himself with people who are at least as ambitious as he is. His friends from high school probably just don't think the way he does. Work ethic, clever, ambitious, they're probably not there. So you have to be judicious about your 3 closest friends. Okay, I want to talk about quitting. So quitting, we actually quit. We had a software company running. We were making money. The product was finished and working. We quit that. We shut that company down. We quit. But the reason we did we had a better opportunity to go to. We had a venture capital funded startup doing the same kind of software. We had a chance to join the company as early employees and make a lot of stock, get a lot of stock options, and they did go IPO. So it's, quitting is not terminal as long as you have something to jump to. If you quit knowing you have nothing to jump to, that is a mistake, because what you could do instead, especially if you've got friends helping you, is you can take a sabbatical for a week or two and say, look, I need a break. I'm kind of mentally, I'm not on point. I want to get away from things for a week or two. There's nothing wrong with that. You should only quit something if you have something better to jump to. If you don't have something better to jump to, then you should try to figure out how to either pivot your idea and to something else that is more promising, or just take a sabbatical, take a short sabbatical. Quitting is an option if you have something better to jump to. Okay, so here are some examples of very high-profile people who quit things, even though they're all billionaires. Bill Gates, Trafodata. That was the company before Microsoft, Trafodata. He and Bill Gates and what was the other guy's name? Paul Allen created this company, Trafodata. It failed. Okay, they gave up on it. Jeff Bezos, over $500 million flushed down the toilet on the Fire Phone. Okay, this was long after Amazon was hugely successful. This was after 2010. I think it was 2014. The Fire Phone, massive failure. Trial and error. People who are successful continue using that path. Okay, Warren Buffett, 2020 lost all that money on those airline stocks. He is still slugging away with trial and error, hoping things work out. They don't always work out. Okay, Steven Spielberg, we know who that is. The film 1941, huge flop, huge failure. John Wayne, the famous movie actor, contacted Steven Spielberg while he was making that film and told him not to make it. Steven Spielberg ignored the advice. The film was a huge flop. Steven Spielberg felt so bad about that failure, he left the country for a while. Quitting for a better option is reasonable if you've got something else to jump to. Spielberg went on to make much better movies. So you have other options. If you quit and you have nothing to jump to, you can find yourself with self-recriminations and moping around and I've got nothing to do and I blew it and I'm a failure, right? You don't want to do that. Okay, so a couple other things I could not fit on the board. There's two choices for a path to getting rich by creating value. Trial and error are involved in both cases. Trial and error, where you're only putting your time at risk. The company we started, the software company, the help desk company, the only investment we had was time. Time to write all the code, do all the marketing material. The only expense was the ad, the cost of placing the ads, which was almost nothing. So trial and error, where you're only putting your time at risk. Trial and error, where you're putting both money and time at risk, is a little harder to recover from than if you only invest time in something. Okay, if you have debt you've taken on and or investors and you have a failure, then you've lost your time and you've lost money too. And that can be a little bit harder to recover from. So the two choices for the path to success using trial and error, only risking your time or only risking time and money. So when you're young, probably your only option is what the option we had. We invested our time. We didn't have a lot of money. And we did not end up taking on debt or investors. Okay, so here are some high value choices. Getting rich by creating value. The whole idea of the video is figure out over the course of your career how to make your limited time more and more valuable. Spend less and less of your time making more and more money. So here are four examples of ways to do that. One of them is investing in income-producing assets. Real estate, rental real estate, dividend-producing stocks, and bonds. Okay, those are all assets that produce income. Rental real estate, someone rents from you, they sign a one-year lease. The amount of time you have to spend on that customer is almost nothing for an entire year. It's a huge leverage. You're creating a lot of value by giving someone a place to live. You're making a cash flow from it, and you're spending almost no time on that. Bonds. How much time does it take to buy a bond? Very little. How much time does it take to buy a dividend-producing stock? Almost no time, right? So we're trying to make our limited time more and more valuable. If you reinvest the proceeds from your rental real estate in more rental real estate, and the same with dividend-paying stocks and bonds, if you keep buying more of those income-producing assets, over time, you're spending less and less time and you're getting more and more money for the time. Earlier in your career, the highest value choice you can make is leveraging your college degree, something you already possess, and taking a job because you're only 2 weeks away from a paycheck, so you can support yourself. Okay, so rental real estate, dividend producing stocks, bonds. There's all different kinds of bonds. U.S. Treasury bonds, very safe, not a high return. High yield, junk bonds, great return, kind of risky. Another option is taking a silent partner or a minority stake in a successful business where you get a stream of cash and you never have to work in the business. So again, limited amount of time doing that because you're not working in the business and you're getting cash for it. So Warren Buffett does that, right? He owns a lot of companies like Geico and Dairy Queen. He's never worked at Geico. He's never worked at Dairy Queen. He makes a lot of cash from those. Hormozy does the same thing. Alex Hormozy buys minority positions in companies, gets cash flow for them. So less and less time, more and more money coming in is the way, and you're creating value in all those cases, making those investments. So the key idea is you make smaller and smaller amounts of your time more valuable by making more and more money per unit of time that you have to spend in the activity. So let's see here. One thing I wanted to mention about Buffett's ownership of dividend-paying stocks. He makes more than $6.3 billion a year on dividends from stocks. $6.3 billion on stock dividends alone. And you can build up to that. He obviously built up to that over a long period of time. So the whole idea was get rich by creating value and using leverage whenever you can, using something you already have to produce value. In the case of our software company, people needed help desk software. The fact that we were able to join a startup in that space, help desk software, that went public, proved to the fact that we really made a good choice on a high value activity. It just ended up being something slightly different than our own company. But we made IPO, we made money from the IPO, so we did well. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer any questions you have if you post in the comments. And I really want to thank everyone for watching and have a great day.